Hello, my name is Keegan Brilliant. I'm a sophomore at Hollins High School in Kenneth City. My presentation is on the economic perspective of vertical farming. Is it worth the cost? And will it feed the ever-growing population? What is vertical farming? Vertical farming is a kind of agriculture designed to optimize the growth process by stacking plants vertically and keeping them in a controlled environment. It's meant to help feed the growing population by introducing high-yield indoor farms into urban areas. The idea was created by Dr. Dixon Despermer in 1999 and has only grown since then. But it is extremely expensive to build and power. So is it worth it, and does it have the means to feed large cities? Slide 2. Wasted water. The current system of farming consumption squanders money and creates lots of costly waste. For starters, food establishments like grocery stores and restaurants can make use of a secondary source of income by sending their unused food waste to be compost or fuel in vertical farms. This allows those food establishments to keep their prices down without laying people off or decreasing the quality of the food in the wake of current inflation. It also gives an alternative fuel source for powering the farms or cities and helps keep landfills at bay. Second, every fruit, vegetable, and piece of meat needs to be brought from rural farms and refrigerated diesel-run trucks thousands of miles to reach densely populated cities. Not to forget that the entire process of commercial farming relies on diesel tractors for everything from seeding to picking. This in turn means millions of dollars are spent on fossil fuels alone, which could easily be rectified by moving the farms closer, using an alternative source of energy, or simply following systems not reliant on highly expensive fossil fuels. The point of the matter is, diesel is quite expensive and unpredictable with current fluctuating prices. As of late 2022, globally, each tractor tank costs between $420 and $1,530 to fill, and between $430 and $3,060 for one truck USD. Lastly, the amount of water we waste. First off, wasting water is an environmental issue too, but from an economic perspective, it's a waste of money and a good opportunity. We use billions of gallons of water that almost always become gray water, which is then flooded into bodies of water like the Hudson River being one of the reasons why it's so polluted. Gray water is simply domestic water that has already been used for purposes like showering or washing machines. It's not so gross that it can't be used for other purposes, but it'll never be safe enough for human consumption. Instead of spending billions of dollars to move this waste into rivers and streams that people and animals rely on, we could recycle it by separating the municipal waste from the water. The waste can go to vertical farms or any type of agriculture in the city as an amazing and cheap fertilizer, and the water can be reused for toilets or irrigation. Slide 3. Supply and demand. Vertical farming is designed to increase the yield of each crop, which just means they produce more for each plant with the same amount of space. How do they do this, you may ask? A few ways. For starters, all the crops are grown in stackable planters, so they are quite literally growing up, and could have 5 times as many clusters or multiple types of plants in one plot, naturally increasing the yield count by using the available space better. Next, it's grown in a completely controlled environment, with sunlights, which are just indoor heating lamps to keep the plant's photosynthesizing, calculated irrigation system, and closed-off facilities that don't even let unfiltered air through. This keeps the plants out of natural danger that could decrease the yield count, like natural disasters, cold snaps, or pests. Plus, it'll never need expensive chemicals like pesticides and fertilizers to keep bugs out. I know I said calculated irrigation systems earlier, which means what exactly? The farms use controlled irrigation designed to not overuse water or to use it for multiple purposes, but to keep the plants working at full capacity. For example, aquaponics is a method of sharing water between fish farms and high water crops like rice, which is actually a very old farming method created in China known as the rice fish system. Or hydroponics/aeroponics being the method of growing the plants in nutrient-rich water instead of soil. They calculate the correct amount of water needed for each crop and use that instead, which may sound foolhardy, but these methods take up between 70 and 95% less water than traditional irrigation. With this in mind, we could produce more food at more food at cheaper store prices in areas with the most people and mouths to feed, without needing more imports. Also, having a new industry appear in the city would create a stream of jobs, which my main source, Feeding the 21st Century, calls the new Silicon Valley specialty industry, on page 172, boosting the economy with high demand, high paying jobs. Slide 4. Overall, it sounds like a pretty sweet deal, but it does have a few drawbacks and limitations. This method doesn't work in rural areas, or at least it's not as needed. Rural areas have a lower population density and don't require extremely high crop yields to keep everyone fed. Instead, the small family farms that have been feeding the locals for years can keep doing that. The farms are small enough to cause minimal impact on the environment and don't need to export far away. So, they have no reason to be replaced with vertical farms. Second, and more importantly, it's a very expensive project to start and power. The startup cost can't be decreased by much, but the power cost can. About 70% of the total cost of indoor farms comes from powering the facility itself. But thanks to science, we have more efficient and sustainable sources of power that don't require fossil fuels, biomass, or nuclear. Instead, they can be powered by wind or solar, which I know has a stigma of being weaker, but there is currently a vertical farm in Chicago that runs completely off solar panels situated on the roof, proving it's possible, especially in sunny areas like Florida, Dubai, or California. Lastly, there is a loss of income from exported goods. With every large city being able to grow whatever crops they want any time of the year, they won't need to import produce from other parts of the world, which can be a big problem for countries that rely on exported goods for their GDP. Luckily, it isn't the only kind of export countries do, but it can still cause damage to the economy of smaller areas. Lastly, sources. My sources include globalpetrolprices.com, which I use to find and convert prices of gasoline, diesel around the world, and then calculate the prices to fill vehicle tanks. I wasn't able to find any sources specific or recent enough, so I had to do the math myself. The book Feeding the 21st Century was written by Dr. Dixon Dismuir, which is what I used for most of the information in this project alone. Dr. Dixon Dismuir is also known as the man who developed the idea of vertical farms. But a lot has changed since he wrote the book, and I needed to find newer sources of information. Like the solar-powered farm is a newer company that wasn't included in the book, so I had to look that up on Google and find it itself, because I read about it vaguely. And yeah, there's my project.